That morning, as the elevator doors slid open, a woman named Elena stepped inside. Moments later, a man followed her with a creepy grin stretching across his face. Without hesitation, he slammed the emergency stop button and began touching her. Inappropriately, Elena wasn't just a colleague, she had been his secret lover. But today, she clearly wanted nothing to do with this self-obsessed man. Without saying a word, she turned around and walked out, leaving him in stunned silence. Just then, the man's phone rang. It was his wife, panic in her voice. She said there had been a massive outbreak of violence in the streets. Before Claudio could make sense of it, the elevator lights flickered, and with a violent jolt, the cabin came to a stop between floors. The man's name was Claudio, a senior financial executive who was used to being in control. He immediately contacted building security and demanded assistance. The guard promised help was on the way, but as the minutes passed, no one came. Growing impatient, Claudio decided he couldn't wait any longer. Using all his strength, he pried open the elevator's inner doors, but the outer shaft barely budged. There was only a small gap. He stuck his head out and shouted for help, but to his surprise, the usually crowded hallway was completely empty. He tried squeezing through the opening, but it was far too narrow. Then his phone rang again. His wife was crying. Someone was pounding violently at their front door. Claudio urged her to call the police, but the emergency lines were all busy. Terrified, he called a close friend and begged him to check on his family. Moments after he hung up, chaos erupted outside the elevator. A group of people came sprinting through the hallway in panic. Among them was Elena. She screamed for help, frantically trying to get inside the elevator, but within seconds, a dark force dragged her away. Then, silence. Frozen with fear, Claudio leaned forward to get a better view. Suddenly, two grotesque, disfigured employees came charging at him like wild beasts. He was too stunned to react. Luckily, a loud noise distracted them, and they dashed down the hall. Claudio slumped to the ground, trying to calm his nerves. His phone rang again. It was his friend. Breathless, he said the city was collapsing, the roads were jammed, and people had gone mad. Before Claudio could reply, a horrifying scream came through the phone. Then nothing. Claudio sat in shock. His friend was likely dead. He felt helpless and alone. Then, the elevator's speaker crackled to life. It was the security guard's voice. Claudio snatched it up and pleaded for rescue. The guard said a team had been dispatched. But before he could finish his sentence, there was a terrifying scream on the other end. Then static, now trembling. Claudio realized something far more serious was happening outside. His phone rang again. It was his wife. As he turned to answer, a hand suddenly reached from behind. He spun around in horror. It was Elena, but she was no longer the woman he once knew. Her eyes were lifeless, her skin pale and decayed. Was now a zombie? Claudio screamed and grabbed a metal handrail. With all his strength and terror, he bashed her skull again and again until she stopped moving. Standing over her lifeless body, he told himself repeatedly, this wasn't Elena anymore, this was just a mindless creature. But the familiar face still haunted him. He shoved her corpse into a corner where he wouldn't have to see it. After wiping away the blood with tissues from his briefcase, Claudio sat back down and tried to breathe. The quiet didn't last. He heard a faint sound outside and moved toward it with the metal rod in hand. To his surprise, it was a young intern from his company. He couldn't recall her name, but he whispered to her through the gap, suggesting they work together to open the elevator. They tried pushing and prying, but it was no use. Then, a loud screech echoed through the hall. The intern panicked and attempted to crawl into the elevator, but the gap was too narrow. She gave up and ran away. Claudio cursed under his breath. Moments later, a zombie came charging toward the gap. It growled and clawed at the opening. Claudio froze. Just as he was about to react, the creature was struck hard and collapsed. It was the intern. She had returned, wielding a golf club like a warrior. She smashed the zombie's head mercilessly. Claudio stood in disbelief. The shy intern had turned into a fearless fighter. Before he could thank her, two more zombies pounced on her. She was tackled to the ground. Claudio watched helplessly, unable to do anything. As he sat back, shaking, he pulled out his phone. The news showed the city was in chaos, the military deployed, the infected multiplying. He thought of his wife. She was still home, still surrounded. Her screams returned to his mind. Anne fell silent. Claudio's hands trembled. Soon after, a man with a beard appeared. He looked like he had barely survived an attack. Spotting the elevator, he rushed toward it and pushed with all his might, trying to squeeze inside. Claudio, too numb to move, knew it wouldn't work. Sure enough, a group of zombies tore him apart right in front of Claudio's eyes. A bitter laugh escaped Claudio's lips. Everyone outside wanted in. He wanted out. No one could get what they needed. In a fit of rage, he made noise to lure a nearby zombie and beat it savagely with the metal rod. In the distance, the company's vice president came into view, being chased by zombies. Claudio screamed to distract them, but they didn't flinch. They burst into her office like a wave of death. One by one, his co-workers were slaughtered. Claudio collapsed, overwhelmed with despair. The quiet that followed was strangely soothing. He searched for answers online. News reports confirmed that a zombie outbreak had overtaken the entire city. A reporter urged viewers to stay indoors, but seconds later, she was swarmed by zombies live on air. The elevator lights went out. In the darkness, a shadow moved. A zombie paced right outside. Claudio feared the worst. But then, gunshots echoed. Hope returned. A heavily armed officer appeared. After checking Claudio for infection, he attempted to pry open the elevator door. He didn't notice a zombie sneaking up from behind, but he reacted fast, spinning around and shooting it dead. The officer explained they needed to restore power to free the elevator. He handed Claudio a pistol and a walkie-talkie, gave quick instructions, and ran off to the control room. Once again, silence returned. But Claudio wasn't afraid this time. Moments later, the hallway lights flickered back on. The elevator powered up, but the door was still stuck. Claudio saw a slider, jammed in the track. He reached for it, but it was too high. Just then, another zombie lunged. Claudio jumped back and pulled the pistol. His first shot missed. He steadied himself and fired again. This time, it hit. More zombies appeared. Claudio shot one after another until they all collapsed. He radioed the officer, urging him to return, but only a scream came through the speaker. Then silence. Claudio knew the officer was dead. He checked the gun. A few bullets remained. For a moment, he thought about using them on himself. He raised the pistol to his head but couldn't do it. More zombies crept up to the door. Their growls sounded like cruel laughter. Claudio braced himself, ready to die on his feet. Suddenly, he heard movement above the elevator. The ceiling panel shifted. It was the officer. Claudio pulled him in. Together, they held off the last wave. Afterward, the officer sat back and shared what had happened. He'd been bitten in the power room. He knew what was coming. He begged Claudio to end it before he turned. But how could Claudio kill the man who saved him? The officer tried to do it himself, but Claudio stopped him. They struggled, and the officer punched him. Eventually, they both went quiet. Hours later, it happened. The officer stood, his eyes blank, no longer human. Claudio had no choice. He pulled the trigger. The officer dropped to the floor. The gunshot echoed through the building. Zombies stirred in the distance. Claudio was out of bullets. He grabbed the officer's shotgun. When he fired, the recoil knocked him out cold. Hours later, he awoke in silence. Then, the phone rang. It was his wife. She was alive. A rescue team had found her. She was safe. Claudio cried for the first time all day. Before he could say more, the phone battery died. But that was enough. He found the metal rod and jammed it deep into the elevator track. Twisting with all his strength, the jammed slider popped loose. The door finally opened. He climbed out. Bodies were everywhere. Colleagues, friends, strangers. He walked through them, step by heavy step. In the lobby, one zombie twitched. Claudio crushed it with his foot. After 8 grueling hours, he was finally free. Outside, the streets were a graveyard. Claudio thought he was the last man alive. Then he saw a bottle of milk. As he bent to pick it up, a zombie leaped from the side. Claudio froze. A bullet flew straight into its head. A sniper military was watching from above. He wasn't alone after all.